Good afternoon. I hope everyone is having a lovely war on Christmas. If you're anything like me, you're all dressed up with nowhere to go. Literally the first Christmas where I don't get to see my family in all of my 36 years on this earth. Yeah, I'm fine with that. This episode was brought to you by my publisher asking when I'm going to do a content promoting my book before Christmas, just under the wire. You can see it right here, along with some other gift ideas for the SFF fan in your life. It's only mostly extremely nepotistic. I had a run-in with the oven, if you're wondering. So I wanted to do a Q&A for a while, but the thing about books is they take a lot longer to get through than movies. And generally when they're released, it's not like everybody reads it all in the same week. It's a very slow burn. But it's been about 5 months, so I figured I can break this down into a no spoiler discussion, or at least what I consider no spoilers. Like if it's in the, you know, blurb on the jacket, then it doesn't count as spoilers. Spoiler section where I actually talk about the content of the book in a spoilery way. Finally, sequel stuff at the end. And I don't want to say it'll be spoilery, but it would be like on the level of stuff that you read like on the jacket blurb, which incidentally has not been written yet. So the way I did this was through Twitter, because that required the least amount of effort on my part. What software did you use to write/organize all of the world building going on? Is it a bunch of Google Docs, more specialized things with Scrivener? Both. I use Google Docs for a lot of it, like especially keeping track of like timelines. Like there's like, I guess sort of the macro timeline of you know, alien civilization and when we hit what milestone, like becoming spacefaring, becoming interstellar, you know, becoming post-natural, da-da-da. And then there's the micro timelines, like, you know, the human family trees and when so-and-so was born and what year they were born and when they went to school and how they met. But mainly I use Scrivener. I just have to have a really clear roadmap before I actually do it. And I use Scrivener for that, and I find Scrivener very good for organizing massive projects, especially one like this that is like a combination of epistolary novel and regular prose novel, because I have to categorize the different sections, especially in the sequel, which has multiple points of view. In your video talking about your book deal, you mentioned reasons why it didn't sell and it having to do with publishing trends. Would it be a spoiler for the sequel if you went into those reasons now? No. But generally when we talk about publishing trends, publishers want something that is similar to something that has already done well. Because like Hank Green's book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, was like the only comp we had when we had on submission. Besides his book, there weren't really any other, you know, best-selling sci-fi novels that were also sort of contemporary, real-world, grounded type stuff. Publishers want to buy things that are similar to things that have done well within the last 5 years, and in terms of like commercial science fiction, there weren't a lot that were similar. Did you deliberately set out to write basically the book Transformers should have been? I mean, if you're talking about the movie, maybe.
Bumblebee, stop lubricating the man.
I feel like so much of my adult life has been shaped by frustration with Michael Bay. And I think like one of the things that like I kind of got obsessed with the first Transformers movie after it came out was that it did kind of set up a really interesting premise, which was that, okay, aliens show up, but the world doesn't end. What now? Especially after the second one, the worst one, arguably. No, actually, I think maybe they're all really bad. But like the second one ends with like the Fallen being like, "We're here, we're queer, we're gonna kill you." But then, you know, the world doesn't end, so like what then? And they kind of tiptoe up to like doing something interesting with it. Like how in the third movie there's like, you know, John Turturro hanging out with Transformer refugees in Cuba.
Buy my book! Buy my book!
I think it is also very fair to say that a lot of it was shaped by frustration with Mr. Bay's Transformers franchise. When describing Korra's outfits, did you try to create an iconic look for a potential adaptation? Yeah, sort of. What I thought were the most visually, I don't know, 50s B-movie scenes. I keep describing this tiered chiffon maxi dress from the 1970s, and I don't know why I decided to go with that and not something more like you know, 1950s. But I think it was kind of like a janky, like a janky version of that. You know, something white and flowing and damsel, but also like cheap and polyester in 70s. When will you write an Omegaverse novel? I don't think I need to. Someone already wrote an Omegaverse Axioms in fanfic. It's on AO3. No, I haven't read it. I'm not allowed. In regards to Cora's experience with linguistics in college, have you ever taken any linguistics courses? Yes, at NYU I had what they call a, concentration, which is what it is when you don't have enough credits for a minor, but you had enough where they're like, we could put that on the degree somewhere, or whatever. Axiom's End read very much like the natural disaster films of the 90s. How much of this was intentional? I didn't really set out to do that, but I guess some of that was inevitable because so much of like the plot and the structure and the character dynamics was very much inspired by movies like that. And like towards the end of the process, like after the book sold and while we were in revisions, like I kind of allowed myself license to just like go all in on it. I've seen Independence Day probably more times than I've seen any other movie. Let's just own it. Like,
Oh, boys!
you know, and it's like there's a lot of Men in Black in there. There's a lot of Invader Zim in there. It's sort of like, which is funny because I saw that Jonan Vasquez posted like, check out my book haul, and that was in it, and I was like, ah, no.
Pathetic humans fleeing in terror at the sight of sin! Nobody even looking at you! It's a show of respect! Their stupid eyes can't handle all this!
So I was watching the new Invader Zim movie, Enter the Floorpuss, and as I was watching it, I was like, holy shit, I forgot how much Invader Zim kind of crept into, like, the world building. It's almost sort of like Invader Zim played straight, like, which I'm sure Jonan Vasquez would be horrified by. Like, even Kaylee Donaldson of Pajiba pointed this out. It's sort of like Ampersand is almost like a, if Invader Zim was competent.
But where are the flames? I can't rule the world without cool flames shooting up behind me! Hit the flames button!
Now that it's out, can you talk about what it was like watching Bumblebee with this in your pocket? Bumblebee came out right before the book went on submission. I loved Bumblebee because it was, you know, the Transformers movie. It's the only good Transformers movie, but it had a lot of similarities. And when I was watching it with Lisa for the first time, this one, we were in the movie theater and she just kind of like whispers to me like, this is a lot like your book. And I'm like, oh, they stole my idea, not the other way around. But the really funny thing was when we were, the first blurb St. Martin's Press sent me, that was like the cover copy, this thing. It basically, like, it read like the plot of Bumblebee so much that it included things that were in the movie Bumblebee, but were not in my book. For instance, like, we're being pursued by, like, evil John Cena. It's like, but no, that's not the plot. That's not what happens. Oh my god. If the Axiom's End series was adapted for TV, would you rather see it made into live action or animated? I don't know, it depends on who's making it. If it was animated, I feel like it would have to be like either anime or anime style, you know, because it should feel a little aged up. But yeah, I don't know. I think that really depends on who's at the helm and what the budget is. Because I think the thing is, like, if it was animated for the content that it is, it would probably be cheaper than live action, because, like, geez. I kind of doubt we're ever gonna see a live action version. What language, slang, phrase do you use often that was off limits due to the period setting that you chose? The truth is, I was a lot more careful about that for the sequel. Like, I have an entire thread that was neologisms that I started to write but had to cut. And I guess they would tend to be like internet thing, like, you know, like we can't use Doge, like much alien, very invasion, or stuff like that, even though that's already dated. I also kind of had a problem of, like, sort of in the opposite direction of, like, language that was a really common then, but is, like, considered super problematic now. Like, as a for instance, like, I think I had a scene where Felix, Cora's brother, calls something gay in, like, a derogatory way, which, you know, a 13-year-old in 2007 absolutely would have. But, like, you know, we had these conversations about, like, do we want to be true to the period or keep in mind who's reading it now, and, you know, defaulted to the who's reading it now. Even though it is accurate, that doesn't mean it needs to be there. Do you think your history of doing video essays will influence more folks to make video essays analyzing your work? Is that an exciting prospect or a dreadful one? I mean, I guess it's not really relevant to me because I wouldn't watch it. I don't think it's fair. I get that not all authors are like that, but I think just from an ethical standpoint, I shouldn't engage with stuff like that. Like, that's not for me. That's for other people to have discussions. That said, I think it would be more likely for me, if only because the type of viewer I have and the type of audience I have is more likely to be interested in video essays. How much of your series did you have done before it queried? I mean, I had definitely had it mapped out by the time it sold, and we pitched them 5 and they bought 1. And they bought 2 more after the pre-sale numbers for the first one came in, so thanks for that. So basically 3 out of 5 are under contract, and whether I get to finish it, I guess, is contingent on how well the first 3 do, so. A question for everyone else who has read the book. Does everyone envision Lindsay as Cora while reading this? And if so, what is Lindsay's opinion of this? That sucks, honestly. You know, this is like something that most authors don't have to deal with. So I guess as an author, I would like to die. I would like for people not to be thinking of me and other things that I've done while they're reading it, but obviously, like, you know, like I say, death of the author for the most part is not a very applicable to the real world theory. That's just not realistic. Where do we send fan letters? Here, this is my business email. Super early, but what's your dream cast and director for an adaptation? Christian Slater would make a great Nils. Oh yeah, that would be, I never thought of that. Yeah, he'd be perfect. The only casting that I thought was kind of a good idea was Pedro Pascal as Nils, but you know, we probably couldn't afford him. What build is Cora in Oblivion? Dark elf, mage, but also she doesn't really like Oblivion because Oblivion sucks. She prefers Morrowind because it's better. Should I read Axiom's End? Well, it depends on what you're into. In your How to Get a Book Deal video, you said your agent pinpointed the issue with why agents thought they could not sell this, and you fixed and suggested that you might share one day. Are you ready to share it now? Are you ready? The one weird trick that was keeping me from getting a literary agent was Cora's age. In the original draft, she was 19, not 21. And you might be thinking, oh, well, really? What? So the first chapter in the final version, she's at work. She's a temp, and she's dropped out of college. But in the first draft, she was in school. She was like, you know, in college rather than at work. And so that first chapter felt a little too YA curious. So it's not really a deal breaker for like character age in genre fiction. It's more just like how it's presented. And so the fact that she was young in the first chapter, was at school, felt a little too YA curious. And so we aged her up, and that was it, adding 2 years to her age. What advice would you give to beginner/novice writers? For one thing, don't make my mistake and over-revise. I think another is, once you get to the editorial phase, except that most editorial notes are suggestions, they're not mandatory, and editors don't expect you to incorporate all of them, let alone even most of them, depending on the notes. Would you agree that Axiom's End falls within the horse girl genre? Yeah. Since the setting is IRL, does that mean that Lindsay Ellis exists in the universe of the setting? You know, I'm gonna go with no. I'm just gonna keep it simple. No, I was never born in this universe. The Green Brothers exist, though. What part of Axiom's End were you unsure about, but you found turned out really well? I guess sort of the dynamic between the two leads. I didn't know if people would buy into it. And that was kind of another reason why I was so squirrely about the actual content of the book, because I didn't want to market it on almost sort of like this borderline romance, because publishing be sexist, and but, you know, by that same token, it's not for everybody. Like, it is a hard, definitely not for everybody. And so I think the result is that a lot of people read it based on this sort of like government conspiracy thriller blurb that probably would not have if they knew that the main substance of the book is not that. And I guess the people that did like it, you know, responded to it in the way that I was hoping. So I guess that, but by that same token, again, not for everybody. The physicality of the aliens feels very vivid and visceral. While thinking up their anatomy, what kind of visual and material references did you make for yourself? Did you settle on their general shape from the start, or was it a longer process? It was kind of both, because it's like I always had an idea of the general shape. That was always there from the very beginning, but the details changed a lot and kind of only really settled towards the end. With the various characters having different opinions on the truth is a human right debate, where on that spectrum do you fall? Regrettably, I think I'm probably a centrist. What I think is what is true matters not as much as how the truth is framed, because any truth can be weaponized. But on the whole, I think like it's more complicated than just full transparency, because, you know, again, any true thing can be framed in a way that ultimately furthers a completely unrelated political agenda. Are you a pantser, plotter, or in between? Hard plotter, outlined a lot. Do you naturally write in third person, or was this a choice made specifically for this book? Was first person ever considered? No. I don't know. I think in a weird way, first person feels more stylistic to me than third person for some reason. I guess if it's in my head anyway, if it's in first person, I feel like there needs to be a narrative reason. Like, who is this person telling this story to and why? And I know logically that doesn't make any sense. Like, third person is just as much of a stylistic choice. But I guess if I was going to write in first person, I would need there to be a reason, like a narrative reason of like why this person is telling their story. How do you think your experience in screenwriting influenced the novel? Well, I feel like it has a very screenwriting-y style. I feel like my prose is very utilitarian, and, you know, that's just a taste thing. Some people like that, some people don't. Also, just like in terms of structuring it, I think more than anything, the structure, like basically like points of attack, inciting incident, act breaks, different sequences taking place in different things and having different tensions. Framing it like that was very influenced by screenwriting, and apparently that is becoming increasingly common. What would you change about the first book, and how will you be adapting what you learned in the second book? There were times when I kind of deferred to editorial, I think maybe to the book's detriment, where, you know, they'd ask for certain things, and then I'm not going to say what they are, because then you're going to be like, ooh, where is it? But, like, I'd do it, and then I, you know, in hindsight would realize, like, this feels kind of forced, but then I'd kind of leave it. I think the other thing is reading it too much, like, reading it too many times and revising it too many times. I think that's definitely a trap first-time authors fall into, whereas, you know, it's your first time and you want it to be perfect, but then, like, the result is you read over the same sentences over and over and over, and then they just start to lose meaning, and then you stop being able to construct a sentence that, you know, is flows well. I noticed a lot of criticism about, like, the writing style, especially, like, in the first third, and I think part of the reason it does feel kind of clunky is because I read it too many times and I revised it too many times, and the result was that, like, you know, the words just stop carrying meaning. So for the sequel, for the most part, when I finished a draft, I would just put it away and do not look at it until it came back from editorial with, like, here's what you need to do. The thing is, like, when you're doing revisions, if you've looked at the sentences too many times, each time you look at it, it becomes harder and harder to restructure it into something that, like, flows better or sounds better. What was the biggest, most surprising change from your original draft for book one? I guess it depends on what you consider the original draft. When I compare the trunked version to the final version, the trunked version was, like, way too chicken shit about the, you know, primary relationship. Therefore, it was very sterile and very no emotions allowed. And the other biggie was where the exposition happened. And there would be, like, these big exposition dumps towards the beginning, which I, you know, upon reflection, I was like, holy shit, this, you know, it works so much better if, like, when she meets Ampersand, she knows nothing, you know, and so she kind of has, it's a journey of discovery rather than having all the information ahead of time. But I guess also, like, in those super early drafts, what kind of ended up being the meat of the book wasn't really there at all. So, like, all these sort of getting to know you chapters that happen, like, in the middle, in the bunker, just did not exist, like, even a little. With regards to the ending, when Ampersand goes, but I'm not human, I was like, smiley face, and then frowny face. Can't decide which feeling to have. How do you view it? I think that's correct. That's the correct response to have. Did Ampersand lie about the known number of spacefaring species? No, but absolutely take everything he says with a grain of salt. He obviously tends to omit truths, if not outright lie. and there are definitely some things in the first book that he lied about.
Stop fucking lying!
Are amygdalans and their superorganism the Great Filter? No, Ampersand was telling the truth about that. There's a lot of talk in the first book about like the Great Filter and why, in a sort of statistical likelihood standpoint, this other intelligent civilization popped up relatively close to Earth, like only about 100 light years away, which, you know, in the grand scheme is like really unlikely. But no, he was telling the truth about that. The superorganism is not the Great Filter, although that will be elaborated on considerably in the sequel. I remember that Ampersand said he had 2 sim files. Was that Chafo and Obelus, or was he not including Chafo because he's dead? That was not including Chafo because he's dead. He has 2, one is Obelus, the other. That is a really good catch of a throwaway line because it is a very important throwaway line. And yes, that will be explored considerably. What were the amygdalans' evolutionary ancestors like? And how do they get their energy since they don't eat? Well, they do eat a little. Christopher Paolini's new book talks about this concept of like a human ship mind, which is basically like a brain that is, you know, kind of fed nutrients constantly. And in this case, they can kind of almost have like a Star Trek replicator inside their own bodies. So it's kind of like that. Basically like similar, or those that exist in the bodies of a similar, get their energy differently from everybody else. Cause like, you know, Esperos and all the other ones, they don't have like these grand superpowers. Then that's basically because they have a different form of energy. But it's kind of same-ish. And the simple answer is I went with matter-antimatter fusion. And as for their ancestors, I don't know if I'll ever really get the opportunity to go into this because I have this whole like, you know, what kind of star did their planet, well not planet, because like in my mind it was like a moon that ordered like a gas giant around like a K-type star, a red giant. So the atmosphere would look very different, and the greenhouse effect would be very different, and the air pressure would be different. And that's sort of being like why our sun is very like, yeah, you know, it's just like way brighter than they were evolved for, and that's part of why their eyes are so big. That and big eyes is cute and alien. I guess it's like kind of a complicated question that I always kind of have in the back of my mind while writing, but I don't know if it'll ever actually make it to the page because it may never be relevant to the actual prose. But the simple answer is like, you know, Ampersand mentions that it like the social group being very more similar to gorillas than like monogamous humans, and their ancestors were also like strictly herbivorous, which is part of why humans are so like Okay, so like I kind of imagine like if humans had evolved as like strict natural vegetarians and then coming in contact with aliens that ate animals, that would just be like, oh my god, that's awful. But I guess that's more subtext than anything. At the beginning of part 4, Cora mentioned she can hear better inflection and even a slight accent with Ampersand's voice. Why does she hear it clearer before the bond? I think that's just because that doesn't really have anything to do with bonding. That's just he improved the the text-to-talk speech to sound more natural. He did not create that software. That's just Mac and Talk, and he figured out how to, like, you know, apply it to an earbud that he made. But really, it's just over the course of the novel, he improves his Siri. That doesn't really have anything to do with any mystical ET soul bonds. Having gotten to the end and read the special thanks, I have to ask, is this novel a low-key Starscream fanfic? I get that a lot, and it's a kind of a weird question to me because I think on a personality level, Ampersand and Starscream have nothing in common.
I'm stupid! I'm stupid!
I guess they are both kind of jerks, but like they're, you know, they're very different characters. Ampersand was not in any way inspired by Starscream. I'd say Obelus was a little though. There is a hidden Starscream in there. I've seen one person catch it. How much of you is in Cora, and what other sources did you draw inspiration from her personality? I guess off the top of my head, not a lot, to be honest. Like, I guess we're roughly the same age, but her mid-2000s experience was very different from mine. And like the way she handled things was very different from mine. Like, she was very unambitious. Her family is nothing like mine. I was extremely ambitious and, like, honestly borderline entitled. Like, I did not know how to deal with failure. Like, I still don't. I also like to think I'm a lot funnier than she is. Like, I'm more witty than she is. I guess in a weird way, I think I have more in common with Ampersand in this sort of combination of being really controlling, really emotionally unavailable, and borderline authoritarian. it's in a weird way, it's easier to pick out your similarities with an alien character because he is representing something more symbolic than just like a human character who has a regular human personality, and that can be a little more difficult to suss out. Did you base Nils off of any whistleblower in particular? Yes, it's Julian Assange. It was like I could try to be like, oh, you know, it's just like he's a combination. Nah, it's Julian Assange. Sorry. Let me backpedal that a little bit. His function in the world as celebrity whistleblower is based on Julian Assange. His personality is not, or at least it wasn't intentional. Whenever I was writing it way back in the day, I like went way out of my way to not research Assange's life, or I didn't want to read any interviews he'd done. I didn't want to know about him as a person because I didn't want Nils's personality to be based off of Julian Assange. But inadvertently, they definitely ended up having a lot in common. Bless you for not killing the dogs, and also for letting us know they were safe. I'll say this, I will never kill a dog in a book. That is the Lindsay Ellis promise. Did you intentionally starve Cora so she had to eat the whole plate?
I ate the whole plate.
Someone on Twitter was like, if there's no whole plate joke in there, I'm gonna be really disappointed, and I just kind of was like, oh yeah, that'd be funny, so I just put it in there on a whim. I didn't really think about it, and so now half of my Twitter mentions are about, oh, you put the whole plate in there.
The whole plate. The whole plate. The whole plate.
What was the inspiration for Ampersand's appearance? Would you ever consider official art getting made? I keep wanting to. The inspiration is sort of like this combination of like just things I like to look at, things I find inherently like appealing, not necessarily beautiful, like just striking, I guess. Like I really like spiders. I really like praying mantises. We have a bunch of pet spiders and mantises, and also this sort of like hypothetical evolutionary ancestor of like what does a bipedal herbivore look like? Because and maybe you'll have things like kangaroos or iguanodons. So I guess like structurally it's sort of a combination of like an iguanodon and a dragon, also because I like dragons. Like if there's a dragon in a book, if there's a dragon in a thing, I'm here for that dragon. Is it a good dragon? Is it a bad dragon? Are we dragon shifters, or are we riding dragons? Are we fighting dragons? I don't care. I'm here for those dragons. That's part of why there's something a little draconian in the way that they look. Not draconian, dragon-like. That was another word I got dinged for. Like, no, that's not what draconian means. And there was also incorporating like insectoid and arachnoid characteristics, not because they felt alien. Well, yeah, because they felt alien, but also just because I like them. Like they are appealing to me personally.
But I got a mantis in my panties.
Okay, from what I can tell, Cora is kind of a self-insert. So in what ways is Cora different from you? Besides her dad, of course. Do male authors get this question? I don't think she's a self-insert any more than any, like, everyman-style protagonist is. I guess as I mentioned earlier, I don't really have much in common with her personality at all. Like, she's good with kids. I am not. You know, despite being an oldest, her way of coping with the world is to kind of fade into the background. You know, she's more of a water sign, I guess. She's kind of conflict averse. I am very confrontational. I guess she's Latina, I'm not. She's Catholic, I'm not. Never had any problems, you know, supporting myself. Never had to move back in with my family. Never had this sort of contentious relationship with my parents. Certainly never called them by their first name. Like, you have everyman characters that are kind of a fish out of water because, like, they need the world explained to them some of the time, and, you know, that is a really common thing, especially in genre fiction, you know, but that doesn't mean they're a self-insert. It just means that the reader needs an entry point. And I guess I kind of wonder, like, if Cora in commercial fiction is considered a blank slate, what wouldn't be? How many dicks does Ampersand have?
Too many dicks.
That's a complicated question. Bex.
Too many dicks.
Living in a post-natural body and being born sterile, he doesn't have any reproductive organs, but if he did, he wouldn't have a penis, it would be an ovipositor. But I guess the corollary to that is he does have some limited shape-shifting ability, obviously. So I guess it depends on how creative he wants to get. He could have infinite. Well, not infinite, but as many as you can fit. Did I imagine a parallel between the hospital scene at the end of Axiom's End and the end of Twilight? Well, I mean, you can make all the parallels you want. Like, and I have seen this a lot. It wasn't intentional, but I guess the other thing I would say about that is, you know, convalescent scenes are pretty common at the end of thrillers, because, you know, if someone gets hurt, A lot of times the denouement will take place in a hospital. Like, you know, even Bright ends in a hospital, the prequel to this, Futuristic Violence in Fancy Suits, ends with a very similar convalescent scene, like, very actually similar. So I just say, like, yeah, but I would also argue that ending thrillers in hospitals is not at all uncommon. Was it always the plan to end the first book in the way that you did? I thought the last line was fantastic and it left a really strong impression. You know, that's funny because I get really mixed reactions on the ending. I was kind of surprised by that because yes, the ending was always exactly what it was. Like there was always a Bondy moment at the end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3, and this conversation that they have in the convalescent stage in the hospital. Basically, you know, where normally, you know, E.T. leaves at the end of the book, he decides to stay. And yes, that was, even from like super early first draft, that was always the ending. And I guess the thing that surprised me is like, some people really were like, yes, what a great ending. And some people were like, wow, that was so abrupt, that just ended. And I was like, yeah, I guess I was kind of surprised by the people who thought it was abrupt, because in my mind, I was like, it was very, very set up. How did you get the idea to name the pug Monster Truck? My friend's ex-boyfriend's roommate had a pug named Monster Truck, and I thought that was funny. Does Ampersand's race have starships? And if so, what are they like? Sort of. So a civilian is not going to travel. Your Fremder group is kind of an outlier and should not be counted. Generally, similars, or in Ampersand's case, an individual that is stolen from basically the body of a similar, are the ones that explore, because those are the bodies that are built to withstand different planetary, like, gravities and air pressure and stuff like that. But being these sort of cyborgy things, they don't need a lot of room. They can just kind of go into stasis for, you know, years and decades on end. So yes, they do have starships, but they kind of would more look like, you know, an Apollo capsule. Like, they're really, really small. Means that, you know, it requires less thrust to get up to light speed. And that is its whole own complicated thing, if you want to talk about, like, you know, thrust and energy and getting up to light speed, and why that is impossible and why that would need so much energy after a certain point. So yeah, despite the fact that their bodies are pretty big, their starships are pretty small. The majority of the mass is going to be devoted to energy and energy production. The actual living spaces are really, really small. But the ones that are here are not on Earth. They are safely away in orbit where humans cannot fuck with them. Aside from Ampersand, who is your favorite monster boyfriend? I mean, come on. It's the Beast.
He fell and I landed on my...
Ampersand was surprised at the speed humans had advanced in a few hundred years. Was the precursor species to amygdalans slower than humans in that regard? They were definitely slower. They were way slower. And part of that is sort of like nature related. One of the sort of dynamics is Ampersand being really surprised that we go to space not because we have to do it to survive, which is what their ancestors did. They only kind of started exploring space as a need for survival. Meanwhile, humans do it because it's there, you know, and that's just we're like, why would you do something so dangerous if you didn't absolutely have to? And they're also kind of like naturally less competitive. They're much more risk averse, you know. Meanwhile, humans are just so dumb, like, so it's not necessarily that they were less problem solving, but like the things that make humans, the things that made our technology turbocharged, like being really competitive and being really risk-takey, they didn't really have. So that's part of why they were a lot slower, advancing wise, why they would have advanced over a period of like from developing writing to, you know, cracking the space barrier. It would be like 30,000 years as opposed to our 5,000-6,000 years. Was the genome's fate planned from the start, or did you decide on it later? Yes. Very first draft, genome died. Do you have an era-appropriate song for your couple ship? I don't know, my instinct is like some cheesy 80s song like, wanna know what love is? Who funds Nils, or does he sell merch like gay frog pills? He's not to the gay frog pills stage of his career yet. I wouldn't put it past him, but right now he's funded by donations. I'm curious about the moment Ampersand and Cora's feelings changed. I have a solid idea for Cora, but less solid for Ampersand. Was it realizing she was also afraid of her own government? Yeah. Actually, I think, yeah, because I think that is, like, the most traumatizing thing that ever happened to him was, like, being expelled from the body politic you devoted your life to. How do you feel about fan fiction and fan art of your work? Which fan art has been most like your vision? I feel positively about it. I support it, but I also feel like I shouldn't comment on it because, you know, I don't want to be like, this person is correct, but you? You know, I think whatever you have in your head is valid. Like, you know, your vision of the thing that I wrote is, it's not wrong. Although I guess my main differentiation from in the fan art that I've seen, it's like, the little I've seen of Obelisk has him darker than the rest of them. Like, no, they're all the same color. They're all kind of this silvery white thing. And Ampersand has a really big head relative to like the rest of his body. Who are some of Korra's favorite music artists and songs? Which of them would Ampersand find interesting or intriguing? Well, to the latter half of the question, none of them. They'd all kind of sound the same to him. But for Korra's favorites, I actually have a playlist for that, and I'll link it in the description. Is the similarity in concept between Awoken and Axioms and coincidental? Did you find that your experience writing a human girl eldritch horror romance translated well? I guess it's sort of like Awoken was when you do an ironic version of a thing you kind of want to take seriously. And not just me, because I think, like, you know, Lisa's book is similar to mine in a lot of ways, especially with its relation to Awoken. We had a jokey joke version of a thing where we eventually wrote a book that took a similar concept and took it seriously. Would you like to write a meeting between Korra and her dad? They will meet eventually. Will a member of either of the two absent spacefaring species, Sister Species, Species X, appear in the sequel? And will we acquire names for those species? Yes and yes. Well, they'll appear in this series. Let's leave it at that. Will Korra's linguist skills become relevant in the sequel? It seems a little odd that the protagonist is a linguist, and yet she never has to do any of the translating thanks to Ampersand's auto-translator. Well, a linguist is not a translator, first of all. Those are two very different things. But the main reason I had her like have a very rudimentary understanding of linguistics is I wanted her to be able to put words to just how little we understood and how, for the most part, the study of human linguistics doesn't really apply to alien linguistics. Like, for instance, a huge component of human linguistics is just mouth sounds and the way words are constructed, or syntax. So it was less about her having a skill set that she could apply so much as her being able to put words to the sheer limitations of being able to apply human language to this hypothetical alien language. I had the pleasure of experiencing your novel through the excellent audiobook reading performed by Stephanie Willis and Oliver Thorne. Will they be reprising their roles in the sequel? Probably. Although the sequel will have 3 readers. I hope. I think. Is there anything you had to cut from Axiom's End that will be in the sequel? It's mostly world building stuff. There was some stuff in earlier drafts that was a reveal in the first book, but I realized would be a more powerful reveal in later books. And then there's just some like world building stuff, like the conversation on gender got shunted into later books. So yeah, I mean, not a whole lot. It was mostly world building. Is there smut in book 2, or are you going to make us wait longer? Yes. But whatever you're thinking, you're probably wrong. Since Bush resigned, who's the next president going to be? Well, it's Dick Cheney. It was kind of surreal because I had to type the words President Cheney like at least a dozen times. Would IRL Kaveh get along with book Kaveh? Yes, but mostly because both iterations kind of get along with everybody. Joke question, when is Korra gonna get it in already? Let me just say, of like the beta readers, editors, and agents who have read the sequel, eyebrows have been raised. Is it easier to write a sequel? Having established a core cast and concept, are the answers to narrative questions or problems more obvious? In my experience, it was so much easier. Part of that was because I kind of came up with the concept for the sequel before I really nailed the concept for the first one. Because in my mind, the first one is mostly set up to me. I know like the meet cute, people will always kind of like that the most, but like really the first one was like set up for where I wanted to go. The sequel has 2 point of view characters instead of 1, and I, for some reason, found that made it so much easier, like being able to hop from different points of view, and also just having done it before, you have a much better idea of your process. So yeah, I found the sequel so much easier to write than the first one. Will Sloop John B make an actual appearance in the future? Yes. Could we expect a sequel to follow Cora and Ampersand, or some new characters? Both. Straightforward question, are we looking at a time skip between books? If so, how long? Yes, small time skip, about 3 months. When did you start planning and writing the sequel to Axiom's End? Again, before the first book was even written. And I guess after the second one comes out, I guess I could talk about like what it was, because primarily it was a character dynamic thing. But mainly it was just this sort of like broad premise idea of how does society cope with this first contact scenario, where the world doesn't end, but also nobody really has any information. Like, how does society cope with that? And I guess that was the thing that interested me more than anything that's really in the first book. Are we going to be seeing more of that asshole journalist, Kaveh? I guess, yeah, here's the biggest spoiler of all. Yes. Kaveh is not only a major character in the second book, he is also the second point of view character. And that's my big reveal. And yeah, and so I guess for those of you who listens to my podcast, I guess we'll talk about that next year. I did not know I was going to have a podcast with a guy named Kaveh.
Oh, you've seen Cloud Atlas, right?
Unfortunately. Oh my god, do you love Cloud Atlas?
I love Cloud Atlas!
Oh my god, no!
Wow, so that was a lot. Like, that went on long enough that the sun has completely changed places. But anyway, thanks for watching. You can buy this for your monster lover friend in your life for Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's or Persian New Year, whatever you happen to celebrate, or for the hell of it. It's not like we're going anywhere anytime soon. If you don't want to support the big box sites, you can buy it from bookshop.org, which gives part of its proceeds to help support independent bookstores during the pandemic. You can also get the audiobook on Audible or Libro.fm or wherever you get your fine audiobooks. Or consider any one of these fine potential Christmas gift for the SFF lover in your life or yourself. And that's it for this year, at least in terms of video content. And the sequel is called Truth of the Divine. It'll be released 2021. It's in the fall. They don't have a date officially. It's sometime in the fall, probably. And yeah, so here's to a better 2021. It's only uphill from here, right?